Good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Councillor Marcus Andrews. Welcome to Audit and Governance meeting on Thursday, the 7th of March. Before we actually start the meeting, there's some housekeeping announcements. So I refer to the Democratic Services Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Please note this meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the website for a minimum of 6 months. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the surface car park at the front of this building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you.
Right, thank you for that. Do we have any apologies?
We don't have apologies, Chair, but we do have 2 members of the committee who are joining us online today. That's Councillor Beasley and Councillor Phipps. Obviously, they are aware that they won't be able to take part in any vote.
So on that basis, there are no substitute reference item 2 on the agenda.
No.
Right. Item 3, declarations of interest. Have you received any declarations of interest?
No, none received in advance of the meeting, Chair.
I would just ask any members, independent members as well, whether they feel they should mention any declarations of interest. I don't think there's anything particularly on this agenda this evening that would prompt one, but I just would ask that question. No indications, okay. Item 4, confirmation of the minutes. Our last meeting was on the 11th of January 2024. Copies of the minutes have been circulated with the agenda. So therefore, I would ask for a proposal that we accept the minutes from one of the members of the committee, please. Councillor Castle is indicating, Councillor is seconding, so I will sign those. Right, moving on, item 5. Have we had any public questions, statements or petitions, please?
We haven't, Chair, no.
Okay. So moving on. Before we go on to the actual meat of the agenda, item 6, I would mention that we are aiming to in this meeting around 7:15 at the latest, on the basis that there's not many things on the agenda, and there is planned to have a training session for members of this committee on some particular items. But in terms of the agenda item 6, it's addressing the local audit backlog and proposals for the 2022-23 audit. Basically, to introduce this, I've got Adam Richins, who will present his paper on this. Mr. Richins, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So, as you said, agenda item 6 is a paper on addressing the local audit backlog and proposals for the 22-23 audit. The purpose of the report is to provide the Audit and Governance Committee with a summary of the proposals for addressing the local audit backlog in England, which was recently published for consultation. You are asked to note Appendix 1, which is the Council's submission to the government in regards to its consultation in addressing the local audit backlog, and Appendix 2, the letter from Grant Thornton, the external auditors, regarding delivery of the 22-23 audit. You are reminded, as part of the introduction to the paper, that actually we previously discussed that the backlog is at an unacceptable level. I think in September it was around about 918, and by December that had only reduced to about 771, still having not been resolved. And I think you also referenced the fact that organisations involved in the oversight and regulation were working on producing a solution to this unacceptable position. I need to be clear about the BCP position. With regards to our 21-22 accounts, our audit has not yet been concluded, and we'll hear from the external auditor in due course. In regards to the 22-23 accounts, the audit has not yet commenced, other than the value for money report, which the committee considered last September. In regards to the 23-24 accounts, ordinarily that will be due to be commenced in July of this year. So as I said, the external auditor will in due course update you on the 21-22 accounts. However, I need to be clear that I have formally complained to the PSA in regards to the failure of the external auditors for the Dorset Local Government Pension Fund to issue us, or our auditors, with an IS 19 pension fund liability letter that our external auditors need to be able to conclude our audit. Consequently, I have raised the same matter and the same complaint to the director of the relevant external audit firm, and I will continue to raise our concerns. At my next hopeful meeting with that external audit firm, I hope to be joined by the Chief Financial Officer for the Dorset Police and Crime Commissioner, who are also suffering from the same issues that we're suffering from. And there may be others within Dorset family that wish to join in that conversation. Returning to the report itself, it sets out the proposals for clearing that backlog, and it identifies 3 phases. Phase 1 is the reset phase. This relates to accounts up to the 31st of March 2022. It highlights the external auditors will issue an opinion based on the work they have done by the 30th of September 2024. This opinion could be an unqualified opinion, qualified opinion, or they could be disclaimed by a modified opinion. Just to remind you, as I said before, the value for money reports will always remain a priority with regards to the audit of the accounts, and the value for money report for the 22-23 accounts was considered by this committee last September. The second phase is the recovery phase, and this relates to accounts from 23-24 to 2027-28. It recognises a challenge for auditors if the 22-23 accounts are backstopped in respect of issues such as the validation of any opening balances. The documentation provides a series of potential future backstop dates, and it reminds us that VFM will still be a priority. Phase 3 is fundamental reform. There are no firm proposals at this stage, but the consultation sets out a number of considerations that are detailed within the report. In respect of Appendix A, which is our suggested response to the consultation, we have highlighted that we consider a 4-week period over which councils will be preparing their 24-25 budgets and having budget councils is insufficient for a meaningful consultation. There is a need to recognise the time it takes to prepare the set of accounts for a large unitary authority, and fundamentally we consider the system to be broken. There needs to be less focus on the valuation of property, plant and equipment and pensions, which is needed to comply with financial reporting standards, which is relevant for listed companies, but is less relevant for local authorities. Can I suggest that you hear now from the external auditor, but to be clear, the outcome is that it is highly likely that this council's 22-23 accounts will fall into the backstop arrangement. Once you've heard from the external auditor, Chair, you may wish to add your own reflections.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richards. Yes, we do have Mr. Peter Barber from Grant Thornton joining us online this evening. Your letter is attached to the agenda papers dated the 23rd of February 2024. Obviously, that letter was prepared only a few days after this consultation document was published by the government, and you may want to update some of your comments in that letter, but equally you may want to comment on some of Mr. Richards' comments, and obviously put your own view of your firm forward as regards this backstop arrangement. Mr. Barber, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. So yeah, really helpful summary there from the Chief Finance Officer. So my only reflections to make in addition to those comments is, and I'll take this chronologically, just in terms of financial years, as mentioned by the Chief Finance Officer, the 21-22 audit, opinion audit, remains outstanding. Our role is twofold. It's the opinion and the value for money conclusion. The value for money conclusion work for that year, and interestingly, the following year, 22-23, has been concluded. The findings in relation to the opinion audit for 21-22 were brought to this committee back in November, and at the last meeting of this committee in January, I did provide a verbal update on the position, and regretfully, very little has changed since that update. The only continued substantive area outstanding is the letter of assurance from the pension fund auditor at Dorset Pension Fund, and there has been numerous correspondences between me and the auditor there, also involving the council, and the latest indication is that is 1 or 2 months away. Clearly, you've heard from the Chief Finance Officer about further efforts on the part of the council to speed up that process. But unfortunately, as I sit here today, I cannot conclude the 21-22 audit until that letter has been received. And I then in turn have to consider what that letter says and decide if any other additional audit procedures are necessary. But just to reassure the committee, subject to that piece of work being concluded, it is my intention and my anticipation that I will be issuing a clean, unqualified opinion. And since my previous update, there are no issues arising of a material nature that I need to bring to this committee's attention. So regretfully, we're just waiting on that one outstanding area. We're now in March 2024, so it is almost 24 months after the reporting date. You've heard about the deadlines for the backstop of the end of September this year. I've reflected on it and I've outlined it in my letter about the challenges that the completion of the 22-23 audit would present. I've discussed it with officers and I am of a clear view that it is not deliverable and that we cannot conclude that audit in the remaining months of the year. Not least because clearly, in order to complete that audit, once again, I would be looking for a letter of assurance from the Dorset Pension Fund auditors for 22-23. And given the historic delivery of those letters, I know that it is very unlikely that will materialise. Interestingly, as a firm, we are taking over the audit of both Dorset Council and the pension fund with effect for 23-24. So in my view, backstopping the 22-23 audit will then give us the opportunity to make a timely start on the 23-24 audit. I have a team lined up to undertake the post-statements audit with effect from the beginning of July. And it would be our anticipation that we would be working with officers at the council to ensure that the 23-24 audit is delivered this calendar year, well ahead of the suggested end date set out in the consultation guidance of May 25. Chair, I'm not minded to add anything else to the papers at this stage, but as always, happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. I've got a couple of questions in my mind, which you, as Grant Thornton representative, obviously doing other councils, accounts as well as ours, might be able to comment or confirm. But I did attend a local government association seminar a few weeks ago, just after this consultation paper was published, and one of the presenters of that was saying that across England, I think there's about 900 sets of accounts which are outstanding. Some councils have 2 or 3 like us. There's one council, I think in Norfolk, that has accounts outstanding from 2015, 2016. And there's an awful lot of accounts which perhaps like some of ours will go. But can you confirm whether there is several hundred sets of accounts across England outstanding or figures like that?
Yes, Chair, more than happy to do that. I think actually sort of some of the the numbers are provided in the papers, and the Chief Finance Officer sort of, I think, outlined the position. But you're absolutely right. The reference to just over 900 that fell, I believe, to just under 800 at the end of December 23. So there are, give or take, 500 local authorities out there that are subject to external audit, predominantly councils, but police authorities, fire authorities, pension funds, etc. So 500. If you assume it's probably still north of 700, that's an average of 1.4 sets of accounts outstanding per council. So this reflects the magnitude of the challenge. But we need to be very clear here that this reset is exactly that, and there will be increased focus required on both the part of all auditors and all councils going forward, with effect from 23-24, to ensure that accounts are delivered in a more timely manner. I do note the observations made in this paper in terms of the proposed response to the consultation. The deadline for producing the 23-24 accounts for yourselves is the end of May this year, so you will have 2 months, weekends, bank holidays, etc., within that period. So it's incredibly tight, in my view, for an authority of your size, and others for that matter, to produce complete and accurate and timely accounts, given that your accounts run to hundreds of pages. And the target sign-off for the accounts for 23-24 is the end of September this year, which I think is, in my view, unrealistic for the bigger, more complex councils. So I do concur with some of the observations in this paper, but I do nonetheless think that the timeliness has got to a point now where it needs to improve significantly, and that is the case at BCP. And I am committed, and I know officers within the finance team are, to bringing forward that sign-off date. And as I said, our aspiration is that the accounts for 23-24, subject to 22-23 being backstopped, those accounts will be signed this calendar year, and hopefully sometime before December.
Okay, and the other observation that sticks on my mind that this gentleman made was that we're talking about England has this backlog, that there's obviously auditing done to accounts in the councils for Wales and Scotland, and his observation was there's no similar level of backlog in those two regions of the UK. So that's because obviously, you know, that they've got a different system. Can you confirm whether England and Wales have, sorry, England and Scotland have minimal backlog? Wales and Scotland, sorry.
Chair, I must admit I'm not fully up to speed in terms of the level of sign off in Wales and Scotland. I understand you're absolutely right that there is less of a backlog, but I do understand that they are subject to slightly different requirements in terms of the audit process.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got Councillor Phipps indicating online that she would like to speak. So, Councillor Phipps, if you flick on your microphone.
Yeah, just a question really. Obviously, we're very frustrated with this absolute nightmare, been going on for years, absolutely terrible. I just wondered, I understand that the council has complained. I heard what Adam had to say. Is there actually a procedure to have the administrators of the Dorset Pension Fund removed for maladministration and replaced? Is there such a procedure, or do we just have to keep carrying on and complaining and waiting? Thank you.
Mr. Barber, I think you've got the answer to that one. I think you're taking over, aren't you?
So the appointed auditors for the majority of councils in England is made through public sector audit appointments, and they have recently let a new contract with effect from 23-24, and we are taking over as Grant Thornton the role for both the council and the pension fund for 23-24. So 22-23 and 21-22, to the best of my knowledge, where that remain the responsibility of Deloitte. Clearly, Deloitte will be considering the guidance here in terms of the backstop and how that applies to both the council and the pension fund. But with effect from 23-24, and my reference earlier to the proposed timelines for that work at BCP, I will be seeking a letter of assurance in the summer from my colleagues who will be undertaking the pension fund work, and they are due to start that audit in July at the same time as we start the BCP post-statements audit.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got Sam Acton, one of our independent members, wanting to make an observation.
Thank
Sam.
you, Chair. Can I firstly thank Mr. Richards and Mr. Barber for your narrative this evening and clarifying what's going to be happening, and also the passionate commitment that you shared with us. I really appreciate that as a member of the public. Mr. Barber, for the benefit of the public this evening, because several months have elapsed since I joined this group, and people might be watching this evening or in due course, could you just remind everybody of the excuse that the current auditors of the pension fund give for why they haven't produced this letter, please?
Yes, based on correspondence I've received from the auditors of Dorset Pension Fund, it is resource challenges within their team, including sickness.
Thank you so much.
Okay, it hasn't been particularly mentioned, but it's in the papers that the deadline for making our comments to the government is actually today, before midnight today. So in the short deadline, thank the officers for preparing these comments. Whether these comments will materially change the government's plans and get them to change what they've sort of decided, I don't know. But what we do need is a proposal to accept the draft comments, and so we make a resolution that after this meeting, the email can be sent, so the submissions do go into the mix together with all the other councils who've probably made them already. So can somebody propose accepting? Councillor Clare-Way and
Yeah,
Councillor Colley will second that. So
I did have some.
oh yes, so we got a proposal, but now you can talk about.
Sorry, I didn't want to conclude that before. I just had two questions and then one request. So first question is, I think that as BCP, we need to prioritise getting a full set of completed accounts for hopefully for this coming year, 23-24. So I appreciate the pragmatism there. What I'm worried about is the quantity of time that's going to be needed to get comfortable with the opening balances for that audit. And whether or not there is actually a time saving involved at all, because obviously a lot of the work in the previous year's audit will then save time in getting comfortable with the opening balances of the next audit. So how confident are you that you're going to be able to deliver the 23-24 audit to plan or to schedule at the moment?
Through you, Chair, if I may.
Yeah, far away.
Yeah. Clearly, in terms of our timetable, I will outline the timetable when I do bring our audit plan for 23-24 to a later meeting of this committee. That timeline is predicated on the production of a timely set of accounts by the council, and discussions with finance officers indicate that they are aiming to produce those accounts by the more challenging earlier deadline of the end of May, and clearly those accounts need to be supported by good quality working papers and subject to minimum sort of quality checking standards as well. As I said, we have a team lined up to start from July. There is an unknown here because the consultation is also includes consideration of what work needs to be undertaken on comparators, and clearly when we audit a set of accounts, we don't just audit the position at the reporting date and the transactions in the year in question. We have a responsibility to check the material accuracy of the comparative figures, and clearly that becomes more complicated if we haven't issued a clean opinion on the prior year accounts. That is less of an issue for the top half of the balance sheet. It becomes more complicated when we get to the bottom half of the balance sheet and the reserves in particular. And there is discussions taking place nationally as to what additional work, if any, would be required on those opening balances. And we don't know at this point. And clearly, once that is clarified as a firm, we will be responding to that and developing whatever audit procedures we think are appropriate, in addition to those undertaken in a normal year, to be able to gain the required level of assurance. But at the moment, I don't know. And if we can't place any reliance and we have to do additional work, it could be substantial. But at the moment, we don't know.
Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, so just as a follow-up, what I'm not entirely clear on is what incentive there is to do as much work as possible between now and July on prioritizing which bits of the audit that's not going to be completed we might get value from for next year. So what would be helpful is to get some idea of how you're prioritizing the work on the 22-23 audit that can be done before the backstop. What work are you doing to make sure that that is the priority? You've mentioned in the paper that, Adam, that some areas were maybe not so worried about being done every year, whereas some parts of the audit are more important. So are you prioritising making sure that those more important areas of the audit that will be helpful for next year are getting prioritised between now and July? Is that a discussion that's going on?
Right, through you, Chair. So just to be very clear, and I think the CFO outlined this, that no work has been undertaken in relation to the 22-23 accounts, and it is not our intention, as outlined in my letter in the appendix, to undertake any work in relation to 22-23, and as a result, we will be purely reliant when we come to 23-24 on undertaking additional audit procedures that will be driven purely by the outcome of the consultation and to what extent we need to get assurance over those opening balances.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got Councillor Mike Cox indicating to speak. He's the portfolio holder for finance. So, Mike, you're joining us online. Over to you.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to comment and thank Adam and Peter for their comments and reassurances for where we're going. I am deeply upset that we won't be doing 22-23, as I've probably made clear in the past. I think it's a complete failure, a breakdown of the whole audit system for local government, and I do personally feel that this backstop arrangement is a sticking plaster and doesn't necessarily resolve the issues going forward. But I think we have to be practical. We have to give it a go, and see what we can do. And I genuinely hope that this fix effectively might solve it. And I as I say, I'm recommending certainly to Adam that not only is he putting in a complaint, I think he should put a complaint into the Institute of Chartered Accountants, because I find their attitude unacceptable, frankly. They have decided to pull out of the audit market for local government, and I have deep concerns that because they've decided to pull out, they have got zero incentive to actually continue and finish the work that they've already started. So that is my serious worry, and therefore that's why I think we need to get the Institute of Chartered Accountants involved, because if we and others, which Adam's already speaking to other authorities, gang up effectively and tell them if they don't do it, then we're going to report them to their regulator, their ultimate regulator. So I mean that's the comments I would like to make. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, we've got a proposal, and I'll just read it out for those members of the public who haven't got the papers in front of them. It's recommended that 1, note the council's submission to the government's consultation in addressing the local audit backlog in Appendix 1, and 2, note Appendix 2, the letter from Grant Thornton, the external auditors, in regard to the delivery of the 22-23 audit. So if we could just have a show of hands on that one, please. That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Barber. Thank you for joining us again.
Can I just can I just jump in? We talked about this the pre-meeting, the possibility of when we do next look at or have the opportunity to discuss the external audit report. It would be helpful for the committee to get an idea of what you were talking about in the paper about the areas that you think are more important and those that you're less worried about. I think it would be helpful for us to be a bit more informed where you think the risks lie from missing out on that audit. That better phrase is what I was saying before. Is that something that could be considered when we next look at the Excel audit opinion?
Mr. Richards?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think when we come to do the training on the statement of accounts, I think we can labour those issues as part of that process. But I think in my introduction, I was very clear around the current regulations we have to follow are very much focused on the requirements for listed companies. And clearly for listed companies, there's a lot attention given to the value of their assets, the value of their pension funds, etc. like that. But with regards to local authorities, my open question is, do we need to spend so much time and energy valuing some of those assets? When we're considering what Highcliffe Castle was built of, and working out whether or not that impacts on the value, I do question whether or not we're spending public money wisely.
Okay, well, that's something to take on for one of our training sessions. Thank you very much. So can we move on now to item 7? I'll just read out the heading. Annual evolution for the 2024-2025 financial year of the audit, fraud and corruption policy, the whistleblowing policy, the declaration of interests, gifts and hospitality policy for officers, and regulation of Investigatory Powers Act and Investigatory Powers Act policy. So Nigel Stannard, I think you're presenting your paper here.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'm just going to make a couple of comments that are relevant to both agenda items 7 and 8, actually, and apologies for councillors who have been on this committee for more than one municipal year, because they'll be familiar with this. So at the outset of BCP Council, the Audit and Governance Committee agreed that the policies that this committee is responsible for would be kept up to date by a business as usual annual evolution process that would make those policies ready for the go live date of the 1st of April of the new financial year, or as near as possible, depending on how the meetings fall. This approach has resulted in these policies being fit for purpose, responsive to legislation changes, and have taken into account and rectified any local issues, ambiguities or loopholes. The annual evolution changes throughout the documents are shown in red text, and the red text stays in the live document so users can see exactly where those changes appear. An awareness and communications programme within the council is planned, and this will remind staff of the general approach and the evolutionary changes. And these new policies will replace the old policies on the council's website and intranet. Please also remember that later on in the year, you will receive specific update reports on the effectiveness and operation of these policies. So this is just the evolution of them. And also, in reviewing Modern Gov this morning, don't worry that there are a few formatting issues that I've noticed in terms of lines and columns being a bit weird in Modern Gov. They are okay in the live document. So thank you for that. So moving specifically to agenda item 7, what do we do to evolve these policies? Well, we review best practice. We keep an in-year log of any issues raised by colleagues. We review other local authorities and other entities' policies. And this year, for the first time, we've used AI to generate what it thinks is a model policy and compared it to our BCP policy. And it's frightening or good that they compare very, very similarly. So the evolutionary changes in the 4 policies this year are in truth relatively minor in nature across all 4 policies. And this reflects that they are now well embedded and standing up well to operational use. I would point out, however, that there is a small addition to the whistleblowing policy that is worth highlighting, and that's on paragraph 8 of the report and on page 39 of our packs. Also, if you want to go to the policy itself, it's on page 7 of 18. And what we've done there is we've added a note that's always been applied in practice but hasn't been explicitly stated. And this is where if an individual is already involved in a theft, fraud, disciplinary matter or employment dispute with the council, and then subsequently raises a whistleblowing disclosure, such a disclosure will not pause the ongoing investigation. It will be considered as a separate matter. And that's to counteract a trend where people that are involved in such issues throw a whistleblowing in to sort of muddy the waters. And this might just explicitly turn that off. Wishful thinking, maybe. But happy to take any questions, Chair, on any of the policy evolutions.
Thank you for that. I think when we discussed this at the pre-meeting, you were emphasising that there aren't any radical major changes to the policy. There has always been a policy. There are some improvements of formatting and items like that. So that is the situation. It's some basic updating, isn't it?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Wayne.
I'm just curious actually about the use of AI, and I know last year I think you said that you'd recruited some apprentices rather than going for the qualified audit specialist, and I don't want to apply too much sort of stereotypes, but I was wondering if this sort of adoption of technology has come about because of these young people in your team, or where has it come from? When you say we, who are you talking about?
Yeah, I wouldn't. In fact, we did get the apprentices to do the AI, the search in AI, but we're cognizant of the general growth of AI, and we were trialing and erroring it on a few things, and this seemed a logical thing to try. And obviously what it does, it goes and trawls the internet for all local authorities, looks at hundreds of them, and then lays out what it thinks is a good summary of all those hundreds. And it's done in seconds, and you can see it typing out in front of you, and it's so clever.
Councillor Connolly.
Are all whistleblowing issues raised with HMAA? And would the ANG committee get to see them? Who gets to see sort of summary of what kind of themes and issues are raised in whistleblowing claim?
Yes, there's an annual report later in the year on the flawed plan. So every whistleblowing case is summarised in that report. Because some of them involve fraud and are unresolved, it is a below the line appendix without the public. So yeah, but the committee does see it later on in the year for the financial year that's just passed. So I think it's on the July forward plan that you see it.
Okay, thanks for that. We've got also joining us online Lindy Jensen van Vuren, and I think you've got a question or a query. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. On the anti-fraud policy on page 48 of 206, mention is made of e-learning, which is a good way of informing the employees of possible fraud and what to look out for. I was just wondering whether you've considered maybe workshops once a year or maybe twice a year, where the staff can join maybe online, or the relevant staff that could join online on a workshop. And if you've got a service provider that could do a short presentation on maybe the hotline or how it works, so that the employees can ask questions on if there's something that's not covered by the training, where they've got an open forum to ask these questions. And then I've got a question on the whistleblowing policy, just to highlight the route of, I tried to look for it, but I couldn't see the route when there is a complaint or whistleblowing, especially when I see there is for internal audit and the number and Nigel's details. But for instance, if somebody is involved, the higher manager, or for instance, Nigel internal audit that the whistleblowing is about, what's the alternative whistleblowing route to be followed by the whistleblower? I don't know if I've missed it, but I didn't see the alternative route. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Stannard?
Sorry. Okay. So I'll tackle the first one, which was the question around training. So the council uses a provider called SkillsGate, who provides the e-learning, and that is mandatory training. And committee will see some statistics later on in the year around take-up rates of that training. As part of the annual effectiveness and of reviewing the effectiveness of the policy. We also, as a team, go into services. We have a sort of holding invite, if you like, that services can request us to go in and do a sort of more face-to-face explanation of the policies, and that typically we go around about half the council services in any given year, and then do the other half the next financial year. So there is a sort of informal arrangement as well as the formality. And of course, I mentioned in my opening gambit that there will be a corporate communication through things like our week and the various staff and management networks to make sure that everybody in the council sees that these policies are evolved and where they can find them and where they can ask questions. So that's the first one. And in terms of the whistleblowing policy, there are three people that the whistleblower, typically a whistleblower blows the whistle to their manager, and the manager can then either report the issue to me, the monitoring officer, or the chief executive, and they can take their pick depending on whether the issue involves any of those three officers. If it involves all of those officers, there are some external lines that the whistleblower can go to, and those are also in the policy.
Thank you for that. You finished, Lindy? Yeah. Your hand's still up.
Chair, thank you. Then I just want to request that the anti-fraud policy be updated with the informal. Nigel spoke about the training as well as the newsletters that goes out, but I didn't see the informal that he spoke about where employees can ask questions on the policy. So maybe, because that is a procedure, maybe just to update the policy with that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. Hello, Colin.
I did have the same thought as Lindy. I noticed that on 4.1, it says that they'll typically be raised by the line manager. But then when it comes to the 7 stages, it says line manager or service director, and then it goes on to the others. So I was just wondering if maybe it reads as though it's only your line manager you can raise with, but actually the steps are service director as well. But yeah, I was a little bit worried about that as well, but that's reassuring.
Well, it's obviously something that if you are doing training workshops, you can emphasise to people. Well, look, time's moving on. We've got a recommendation in front of us, which I will read out again. Approves the council's anti-fraud and corruption policy, whistleblowing policy, declaration of interest, gifts and hospitality policy for officers, and the regulation of the Investigatory Powers Act and Investigatory Powers Act policy for 24-25 financial year. So can we have a show of hands just to adopt it? Yeah. That's fine. So that policy is now adopted. So moving on, the next item is item 8, financial regulations, annual evolution for the financial year 24-25, and it's Mr. Stannard again.
Thank you, Chair. So a reminder, first of all, that financial regs, as well as being a standalone document, is part 5 of the council's constitution. So any agreed changes by this committee will need to be approved by council, which is on the 23rd of April. So consequently, of course, and subject to approvals, the 24-25 financial regs evolution will go live on the 24th of April, the day after council on the 23rd. So similar to the evolution of the policies, there are very few changes apart from Part G. So paragraph 8 explains that it's been necessary to make some changes, particularly to Part G, as a result of legislation reforms, namely the Procurement Act 2023. There are 5 key changes, and these are summarised on pages 137 and 138. Just a note on change 1, first of all. This is headed a threshold adjustment, but it is more accurately a language change adjustment, as the new 30,000 VAT inclusive language that we must now use is in effect the same as the old 25,000 VAT exclusive figure in operational terms. So in other words, it's a different way of expressing the same threshold in monetary terms. But we must now think of everything VAT inclusive 30,000, and that's been changed throughout the financial regs. Please also note change 3, which is the removal of waivers of financial regulations. The new legislation requires procurement decision records, acronym PDRs, and these need to clearly articulate why a commissioning officer wishes to deviate from any of our own financial regs or any legislative norms. There are some provisions where this is possible, such as in competition requirements, but this must be open and transparent on the decision record, and these decision records, we don't know this for a fact, but it's likely that these will have to be published and made transparent to the public. Finally, councillors, please note a small change is required on page 179 of your packs, page 36 of the financial regulations. So paragraph 16 needs to read the following. All procurement processes of any value covered by the healthcare services provider selection regime regulations must be agreed with and run by the strategic procurement team. Currently, paragraph 16 is an erroneous repeat of paragraph 13. Rest assured, the version that goes to council will show the correct change. Could I also draw your attention to the second recommendation? Because of the legislation changes, we're seeking a delegation to make any changes necessary to financial regs as a result of those legislation changes in year. We won't have a choice, we'll have to do it. These could be simple changes such as replacing acts like the Procurement Regulations 2015 with Procurement Regulations 2023, but they might also be some more technical changes necessary when the full guidance is available. We're expecting those changes in October 24, but that is still uncertain, and there's growing evidence that that may slip. Thank you, Chair.
Okay,
Happy to take any questions.
Well, on that second recommendation where you're asking us to delegate to the Chief Finance Officer amendments, clearly if they're more than minor but sort of getting on for major, I think it might be useful if they could be, I could be contacted and the vice chairman could be contacted, you know, if there is something that you have to change mid-term, as it were, which is probably more than just typographical error.
Yeah, we can do that, but rest assured, you know, I plan to bring, you know, for example, my quarterly report, I would bring any changes to the next available Audit and Governance Committee as a schedule.
Noted. Thank you very much for that. Is there any questions or debate on this? Any Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at your report, Nigel, in point 10, where we're talking about the public procurement regulations reform, and the duty now that will be placed upon us to basically to include a duty on contracting authorities to have regard to the particular barriers that face small and medium-sized enterprises and to consider what can be done to overcome them. So I'm just wondering, what, as a council, what are we doing, or what do we plan to do to encourage those providers into the marketplace? And I also wanted to ask you about the Social Value Act. That was 2013, but has been changed recently, I understand. And what are we doing as an authority to ensure that the contracts that we procure really do provide economic, social and environmental benefit for our residents?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, through you. Tackling the first one, can you remind? Sorry, I've lost my train on the first one. What?
It's what we're doing to support.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, with regards to the duty placed upon us to support small and medium-sized enterprises and smaller businesses, etc., into the marketplace. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have some plans already, but we need to see the detail of whatever the government says in terms of operational requirements. If I can use a sort of practical example, currently, when there's an opportunity for a council contract, companies have to log into a portal called Supplier in the Southwest, and you've got to get a log on and you've got to do this. And obviously that does put certain small and medium-sized businesses off. That is being done away with, and the council's got to facilitate a much easier way for those people and companies to see our contract opportunities. So we're going to have to publish what's called a pipeline of contracts that are, so a very clear type, a rolling pipeline of contracts that are coming up 18 months in advance of the opportunity. And that's got to be published on our website. And that's perceived as a big opening up possibility. And then there'll be practical things like doing away with the signing on in the portal, but that sort of detail does need to still be thought through, and it is dependent on what the government say or put in place for things we might have to follow in that regard.
Is it okay, Chair, to just make a follow-up point?
Yeah, far away.
Thank you. With regards to that, so will we be pursuing like an approach to co-production, co-design, to work with perhaps those smaller enterprises and provide some of the infrastructure or enable some of the infrastructure that would allow them to be able to take part in those processes? Thank you.
I'm struggling to answer that level of detail, frankly. So could I take that away to the strategic procurement team and perhaps provide you with a briefing note, and I'll circulate that to the rest of the committee on your behalf, Councillor Armstrong? Yeah, thank you. And then with regard to the second element of your question, which was the Social Value Act. I'm just quickly scrolling down. So in financial regs itself, paragraph 10 of part G, I believe. Let me just double check that. There are a series of legislative things that we have to consider. So it's embedded in financial regs, that social value in that particular clause. But again, in practical terms, in our expressions of interest and tendering, we have criteria within every contract. They vary in percentage terms. We as a council have determined that they must at least be 10% of the scoring evaluation, and they could be more depending on what type of tender it is, or what type of opportunity it is. So we very definitely include it, and as a minimum it's 10% in our evaluation scoring.
Okay, well, there's three other people indicating to speak. Councillor Phipps, you were first. Councillor Phipps?
Sorry. Yes, sorry. I thought you said me. Okay. This is regarding changes 3 and 4. And just to sort of get some idea of understanding of it, could you just take me through the steps of how this would work under the old version and the new version of the regulations? For example, you know, if you're going to book a chef for some catering services, then, and you estimate the cost will be around 32,000, something like that, so it's over the 30,000 mark. Do you raise a waiver, get a number of quotes, or do you go out to tender? What are the steps you would take, and who would be authorising this expenditure? I just like to get some idea of the difference between the old version and the new version. Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, I don't know about you, Councillor Fitz, but the word waiver was always problematic for me in that it, you know, should we really be waiving financial regs? It's, you know, that there are good reasons why not all contracts and not all tendering can follow the procedures that are ideally in place. You know, there may be things such as urgency. There may be limited supplier market where somebody might have a statutory right to that opportunity. In you know, a utility, for example, we can't ask a non-utility company to come and mess around with, you know, electricity or, you know, or infrastructure that BT own or something like that. So they're limited. So in the old days, we would have written a waiver to explain why whatever we were waiving. So typically, you know, not getting 3 quotes, for example, we're just going to go to somebody that we know. And why is that the case? The waiver would need to explain why that is happening. In the new world, exactly the same, but we do away with this horrible word waiver, and the commissioner must stand up and be counted very, very clearly in a very transparent procurement decision record, which outlines exactly why they're doing what they're doing. Why are you only going to one supplier? You've got to describe the urgency, you've got to describe the whatever it is, that must be included in that procurement decision record, and then that must be published, and obviously it can be challenged by others who might say, well, I can easily give you that service. What are you talking about? So that's the idea of the reform.
Yeah, can I just come back on that? That's fine. So if you did want to book somebody, a chef for some catering or something, then at that sort of level of financial level, then would you, you know, you just explained to me the waiver situation, that in fact you're strengthening that, I think is what you're saying. So, but so what would you do with this? You know, would you still get a number of quotes? How would you actually do this under the new regime? Would you waiver it or get a number of quotes, or what would you do?
bear with. I'm just trying to find the relevant section in financial regs. I'm just scrolling. Bear with.
You explain the waiver, and it seems as though you are strengthening that. I understand that, but
Yeah.
it didn't really answer all of my question.
No. So for the avoidance of doubt, there is.
Or would you go out to tender? Would you go out to tender on it? What would you do?
Yeah. So for the avoidance of doubt, there is no such thing as a waiver anymore. So on page. So on paragraphs 22 and page 181 of our pack, there's a series of tables which outline the competition requirements. So at your 32,000 level in your example, that will be part E or table E, which is on page 182. So the expectation there is that services do not have delegated authority to go away and do what they like there. That procurement must involve the strategic procurement team, and they are there to keep services on the straight and narrow, to make sure they follow the legislation, make sure they follow both our own rules and legislative requirements. And in that particular example, it's their responsibility, not the services responsibility, to identify the most appropriate route to market, they call it. So it could be 3 quotes, it could be a tender, it could be going to a government framework because it exists and it's the most efficient way of doing it. So there isn't a you must always do this approach. The strategic procurement team will determine the most appropriate route to market for those transactions now over 30,000, and services only have a delegation below 30,000 to do 3 quotes or other forms of competition.
Okay, thank you. That's a much better explanation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Vice Chairman, I think you're indicating.
Yeah, sort of overlaps with that one. The procurement decision records approach, moving away from waivers, thinking about some of the issues that have come before us recently, do you think that this is a better system for providing assurance around some procurement decisions that the council have made? Do you think this is better than the previous situation we had? And what's going to be the mechanism for monitoring these PDRs and making sure that they're all completed appropriately and as they're supposed to be?
Yeah. So first of all, opinion as to whether it's, I think it will, but not necessarily for any of the internal stuff. I think the fact that they'll be likely have to be transparently placed on our website for external, it focuses the mind of a commissioner to say, we're going to, if you think builder X is the only builder that can provide a wall, probably there's going to be 150 builders that say, well, I can do that. So there's going to be that regulation through transparency. And the second part of your question, remind me.
How will we get assurance that those are being completed appropriately and monitoring of it?
Yeah. So the strategic procurement teams is the responsible body to publish these and store them and make sure they're appropriately filled in. There is a government entity called Crown Commercial Services, which is has a sort of they ask local authorities to give them samples every now and then, so they will also act as a quality assurance, external quality assurance, and they will be holding the strategic procurement team to account on, why are you allowing these procurement decision records through, because they're not very good, might be one of their observations. So that's the broad governance structure of procurement decision records.
Okay. Councillor Herridge.
Councillors Phipps and Connolly have covered both my questions quite adequately, actually, so I'm going to not now.
Well, something that you could do for us, we do need somebody to propose accepting. Yeah, fine.
Thank you, Chair. It's Nigel, it's in the financial regulations document, just above point 30, number 31, with regards to contract and supplier relationship management. So what my question is, again, given some of the issues that we've had in the past, of what training and support will be available to our staff to ensure that they're fully equipped, and up to speed and being able to manage some of these complex contracts and processes. Thank you.
That's a tricky one to answer because it is the responsibility of the service director to ensure that any staff who are commissioning know what they're doing, frankly. So ultimately it's the service director who's next on the line if they're making staff, ill-equipped staff run procurements. So again, there's training opportunities and there's training done by the strategic procurement team to equip commissioners. So there is internal training. So yeah, tricky one to answer in terms of how we might check or determine whether all these people are up to scratch that are actually doing this commissioning. But yeah, if you got any thoughts on that, yeah, happy to hear them.
Chair.
Mr. Richards.
Chair, just to highlight, I've been invited to a contract and procurement board, which is starting from next Monday. I think that's a good question. I think I'll take that to the board and ask them to reflect.
Yes.
Thank you. What really sort of had me thinking about it was when we've looked at waivers and some of the reasons why we've then had to have the waivers. Some of that was around contract management. I know we've looked at this in a previous meeting, it came up. So it was really just in response to that to ensure that we could keep any of those, I don't know what the word is, but keep those to an absolute minimum and make sure that staff are empowered to be able to manage the contracts and get the best value at many different levels out of them. Thank you.
Okay, almost it. Councillor Harriott, will you propose the recommendation? It is proposed.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Well, Lindy, we will let you have your say. And we'll look for a second at Lindy.
And thank you, Chairperson. On page 173, on the asset management paragraphs, it states that assets or inventories maintained for assets above £1,000. So I assume that anything below £1,000 are being written off. And I know that's traditionally been done on many levels, and many entities do write off any purchases, even though it's an asset below £1,000. But just to highlight that maybe when we get to the financial statements, it is not in accordance to the accounting standards, as there's no thresholds in the standards on when you should write off an asset or not. So it's just maybe something to keep in mind if that is the intention of that paragraph in the regulations. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Stannard, you know that, or you want to respond?
We may be conflicting two things there because this is not about entries in the accounts. This is about because obviously we've made the purchase because the purchase is our notes and it's in the accounts, it's in the ledger. This is about maintaining a local inventory. And the purpose of a local inventory, of course, is to make sure things aren't walking. And the £1,000 threshold is just a pragmatic, where the inventory is going to be of the more material items, not the boots and uniforms and stuff that our colleagues may be wearing, but might include things like leaf blowers and mowers and those sorts of things.
Okay, noted. Looking for the second proposal. Councillor Chapman Law. Okay, it's seconded. I'll just read it out for those who haven't got the papers in front of them. So it's recommended that the Audit and Governance Committee, 1, approve the financial regulations as shown in Appendix A before referral to Council for adoption. The operation will go live. Date will be the 24th of April this year. 2, approve a delegation to the Chief Finance Officer and Monitoring Officer to amend the financial regs in year if the Procurement Act 2023 or secondary legislation, Public Procurement Regulations 34, requires such an amendment. The Head of Audit and Management Assurance will report any necessary changes to the first available A&G committee meeting. So can we have a show of hands in support of that recommendation to full council? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you for that. And that is the last item on the agenda for A&G this evening. So those who have been watching online, thank you for watching, and I will now close the meeting at 11 minutes past 7.